Hey, that shit hit different. On 4 down. Hey, on the guys, I know y'all been waiting on this one. It hit different. Hold on. Gang. Hey, try to run and still get shot. That shit hit different. Hey, stuffing hollows in my Glock. That shit hit different. Hey, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Hey, gun size a boss top. That shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Hey, that shit hit different. Hey, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch, tax the swifty to the Glock, make it spit different. Hey, bro, just beat a murder case, that shit hit different. Hey, my side bitch another race, that shit hit different. Hey, I got a Glock, bro, got a Glock, but bitch, my shit different. Hey, I got BBs round my neck and them hoes hit different. Hey, I cut my baby mama off, cause that bitch be trippin'. Hey, caught him lacking at the store, these nigga be slippin'. Hey, got 33 in my 23, Scotty Michael Pippin'. Y'all ass tweaking bitches merch, you know it hit different. It's 200 on my dash, no more whip different. I put my shooters on your ass, it's gon' hit different. No, my boys ain't come to play, they gon' kill a way. Try to run and still get shot, that shit hit different. Hey, stuffing hollows in my Glock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Hey, gun size a boss top, that shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Hey, that shit hit different. Hey, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch, when she found out that you rap, that shit hit different. Hey, when her sister let you clap, that shit hit different. Hey, think I'm lacking, but I'm strapped, that shit hit different. Hey, I put my city on the map, that shit hit different. Hey, I'ma fuck a doggy style, cause it hit different. Hey, screaming free the problem child, bitch, it hit different. Hey, all my shorties going wild, bitch, it hit different. Hey, milk the game like a cow, bitch, it hit different. Hey, when your cousin them the ops, you know it hit different. Hey, when you really on your block, bitch, it hit different. Hey, when you really worth a check, that shit hit different. Hey, I put the block around my neck because it hit different. Hey, bitch, try to run and still get shot, that shit hit different. Hey, stuffing hollows in my Glock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Hey, gun size a boss top, that shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Hey, that shit hit different. Hey, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch.
We Japanese still. You getting cooked in front of your family like a Japanese meal. It's Yashup Hibachi and none of you niggas can stop me. But can't help but watch me. So look, bro. Brothers was bringing up Nigeria, which inspired me to go and do some more research on the prehistory of Nigeria. Because, this channel was built and I'm built off of actually doing the research, actually spending my resources and to gain knowledge and gain understanding of the topics. Dilettantes don't do that. They don't care about the topic. They just speak on things from a surface level, sometimes not even that, and they come to these conclusions because they don't do the time and the due diligence to actually understand and learn what we do have in these areas. So tonight, or excuse me, this morning, I want to talk about the prehistoric developments of Nigeria. Where do these people come from? How deep is the history? How deep is Nigeria history? Because if you let these guys tell it, they're going to tell you that it's a prison and that sub-Saharan Africans have been trapped in these areas like Nigeria for tens of thousands of years, 100,000 years. If you let these dilettantes like Garfield, Chief X, and others try to tell you the history of Nigeria or the people of Nigeria today. So we're going to get an understanding today. We're going to see what the experts in the field say, and we're going to base it off the empirical data that is, allotted to us. So with that being stated, let's get right into the nitty gritty. We ain't gonna waste no time with this, man. You understand? We ain't gonna waste no time. We're gonna get straight to it. And again, all of this is under fair use because we are doing this for education purposes, giving our commentary and doing this to teach. So with that being said, you will see the fair use banner on the bottom. Anyway, let's get what we came here for, right? Let's get to it. So we're gonna open up the Kindle. I was about to say the handy dandy notebook. Go to my handy dandy notebook. With that being said, let's open up the Kindle. Let's get started. So this is from a book called the Oxford Handbook. And I want this to take over the whole screen. This is from the book called the Oxford Handbook of Nigerian History. As you guys should be able to see here. And we're dealing with chapter 5, Prehistoric Developments in Nigeria. By Peter Bruinick. I don't know how to say that properly. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name, brother. Word to Chief X would say, oh, these people are Afrocentric, da da da. I'm pretty sure Peter Bruinick is just doing his job here, compiling this information, right? Anyway, the introduction. It states, from its northern to southern borders, Nigeria spans a succession of extremely varied ecological zones. In the north lies the Sahel, similar in places to the rainless Sahara. The Sahel is bordered to the south by the grasslands and savannas of the Sudan and Guinea zones, which eventually give way to the tropical rainforests along the Gulf of Guinea. These zones differ widely in the natural resources they offer for human subsistence and in the conditions for crop cultivation and animal domestication. Despite these differences, state formation appears to begin almost simultaneously across all of Nigeria's ecological zones at the first to the second millennium CE. So you don't start seeing state formation until the Common Era. That's pretty much agreed upon in academia. It says here, during this period, the early states appearing are the Kingdom Borno Empire in the Sahel North, the Kingdom of Ife in the Sudan Guinea grasslands, and in the tropical south, an empire known only through the royal grave of Igbo Ukwu. How and why did these kingdoms arise with such sudden simultaneity? There can be no doubt that these reasons lie in developments that precede their appearance. State formation is not instantaneous and spontaneous occurrence, but rather the result of economic and social developments with prehistory roots. How far back these roots should be tracked depends on the chosen theoretical framework, apart from the fact that all the empires mentioned above can in principle be tracked back to the Pleistocene and early Middle Holocene hunter-gatherer communities of Homo sapiens. There is no apparent plausible connection between distant Paleolithic developments and the historical empires. It is only in the last period of sub-Saharan Africa's Stone Age development, commonly termed the Later Stone Age and spanning from approximately 10,000 BCE into the first millennium BCE, that various developments and innovations come together, which will prove significant in the transition from prehistory to early statehood. And that also shows that these areas and these regions were not really inhabited like that until this period, as we read in other sources as well, that Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, was largely uninhabited, especially in the western region, until recently. It says here, however, these developments and innovations are so wide-ranging and diverse that scholars today are critical of drawing them together in a single period and increasingly avoid the term later Stone Age. The changes can be roughly described as follows. At first, there are hunter-gatherer communities with inventories of microlithic stone tools, of which the Iwo Eleru sites in the southern Nigeria is best known example. Groups with similar inventories were spread throughout all of Africa at this time. Then, approximately 6,000 years ago, the first pottery appears. Although ceramic vessels function as distinct markers of certain prehistoric epochs, their beginnings in this period seem tentative and without any apparent significant consequences. Only from the second millennium BCE is pottery produced in large quantities, becoming a fixed part of the material culture. Its appearance is closely linked with food production and significant economic revolution. And again, as you're going to see repeated, after 2000 BCE is when we start seeing population density increase in Nigeria and surrounding areas. Before that period, It's scarce, very few hunter-gatherers, which were most likely of the A and B haplogroups. We've covered that to ad nauseum on this channel and prior episodes. So we all know A and B was most likely there first before we start seeing a lot of the YAP markers, before we start seeing the RV88 markers, 78 markers, so on and so forth, right? An economic revolution. Food production makes up one of human history's most consequential turning points observed from a global perspective. The cultivation of crops and domestication of animals represents an economic change with social consequences that prove the first step towards complex political and social systems, including highly advanced civilizations. Today, however, Africanist archaeologists agree that hunter-gatherers' dualist conception during one stage and agricultural production during the next runs counter to empirical observation. A linear evolutionary framework does not do justice to simultaneity and variety of existing lifestyles and oversimplifies the complexity of processes at the transition between foraging, herding, and farming subsistence strategies. For example, there is considerable evidence that crop cultivation major innovation did not lead to the disappearance of hunting and gathering or pastoralism. As a result of this diversity, scholars prefer to use economic changes and archaeological traditions when chronologically dividing later prehistory in time and space. In its terminology, too, the archaeology of Africa stands somewhat apart. The rise of food production in Europe and the Near East is generally termed the Neolithic Revolution. In the following period, up until till the manufacture and use of metals is described as the Neolithic period, originated from its primary center in the Near East. The Neolithic innovation spread across Europe as a bundle of new technologies consisting of crop cultivation, animal domestication, sedentism, and ceramics. However, these easily determinable core elements of the European Neolithic appear in Africa at varying times and in various combinations. Consequently, Africanist archaeologists differ on which of these elements define the beginning of the African Neolithic. And for anybody that's new to this, Neolithic means the new stone period, right? It says, given the resulting terminological confusion, scholars have long since cautioned against the term Neolithic in an African context. And as we read on, you're going to see why. Because again, these innovations, these technological innovations, they don't get to sub-Saharan Africa until later, which is going to also point to the origin of these groups of individuals that's coming in here, because they have this technological know-how that comes from outside the region that is foreign to the region, and we see them come in with it. So therefore, okay, they have to be either descending from people or getting it from people that already had those packages. Um, but an Africanist will try to argue that, oh, everything is convergent evolutionary, and, it just popped up. And that's just unnecessary, because we know where the direction vectors, migratory vectors are coming from, which is coming from the north, or coming from the Sahara, where these people already had agro-pastoral packages. They already had animal domesticates. They already had ceramics. They had understanding of pyrotechnology and so on and so forth, right? Which we're going to get to later. It says, nevertheless, there is no clear alternative even today to refer to the period of pre-metallurgy food production in Africa. The Saharan roots of food production. This is just what I was just hinting at. All right, so there's no wonder where agro-pastoralism comes from, where agrarian lifestyle comes from in the context of sub-Saharan Africa, Western sub-Saharan Africa, especially Nigeria. There's no reason to play these Africanist games, because we actually can see through the archaeological record that it's coming and being disseminated from these Saharans. It says here, since the end of the last ice age, the Sahara has seen significant climatic changes, and these play a decisive role in determining the roots of food production in West Africa. During the last glacial maximum, spanning from approximately 23,000 to 18,000 years before present, the desert was even drier than today and extended further south. And I want to pause on that for a minute. So the Sahara Desert would have been bigger during the LGM. And, a lot of these areas that we associate with West Africans today, or sub-Saharan African today, would have been dried up as well. So a lot of the population density would have been even more scarce during this time. They would not have been living in these regions, because it would have been a desert. So it's pretty simple. It's called the Saharan heat pump. every 20 or 10 to 20,000 years, it becomes a desert, and it goes back to a lush green area known as the Green Sahara. But even during this time, it was even worse during the last glacial maximum, the youngest, driest period. It was even drier then and extended to a lot of these regions that we know as green today, the savanna regions, and even below that, Nigeria, Gabon, Ghana, and stuff of that nature. Anyway, I just thought that was key and important to bring that out. It says here, after that, the rains returned and opened up the previously uninhabitable desert to human living, close to 10,000 years before present. This is why when we read earlier that you don't really see any human activity until this period. Because again, during the youngest, driest period, during the last glacial maximum, this place was very, very dry and uninhabitable. Very, very dry and very uninhabitable. So you would not expect to see. This is why after 10,000 years, you start seeing scant populations of hunter-gatherers, most likely being A and B. And we know that because we did a recent dig in 2020 and zoomed the bodies there, sequenced the genetics there, and we seen A00 and some B markers there. We didn't see any E markers there. It says the desert saw its last arid period with historically high rainfalls leading to the Holocene's highest lake water levels and the furthest northern expansion of plants of West African origin. This is the beginning of what we know as the Green Sahara, right? This is my commentary right away. It says here, the rainforests in the south thrive and the savannas grasslands expanded northward, creating an environment of rivers and permanent lakes at the southern border of today's Sahara. The prehistorical water levels of Lake Chad make clear how different the area was from its current state. During the last glacial maximum, Lake Chad was completely dry, but during the early Holocene, its water level rose a full 40 meters higher than its current level, making it Africa's largest freshwater reservoir of the time, known sometimes as the Mega Chad. These climatic developments are attributed to the shifts in intertropical convergence zones where humid air from the south of Africa meets drier air from the north, precipitating monsoon rains. During the LGM, the intertropical convergence zone is considered to have been further south because, again, it was a lot drier than that time. The rain's return allowed people to return to the Sahara. In this case, hunter-gatherers from the south who were most likely following the northward expansion of the savanna landscape. It is to them that Africa owes two significant innovations. One is the invention of manufacturing vessels from fired clay. Ceramic vessels enabled new means of food production, perhaps even what may be termed a culinary revolution. And as we've seen in prior episodes, AM13, you had A markers also in the Green Sahara as well. They would be a part of a lot of these hunter gatherers. We have EM2, we have RV88, EM78, which is E1B1B, all culminating, coming together during this period of the wet phase of the Sahara. It says here the oldest pottery comes from the Central Sahara. Finds from Mali's Baniagara Plateau have yielded similar dates going back to the 10th millennium BCE, as have excavations at the Basampla Cave in Ghana. This places the North and West African ceramics among the world's oldest, further bolstering the theory that ceramic vessels should not universally be considered a byproduct of food-producing economies, as seems to have been the case in most European and Southwest Asian traditions. Rather, the earliest pottery was produced by hunter-gatherers. It is conceivable that the innovation was motivated by the rich food resources presented by the Peninsula of the Sahara's early Holocene grasslands. However, these resources necessitated cooking, and in turn, the production of vessels to reliably cook the food. The second innovation with the roots in the Sahara Desert is pastoralism. A pastoral economy places the care and keeping of animals, particularly cattle, but often also some proportions of sheep and goats at the center of human life. In Africa, domesticated animals' appearance is the first step in the transition from hunter-gatherer subsistence to human-controlled food production, and thus one of the most significant economic innovations in Africa's Holocene prehistory. African pastoralism originated in the Middle Holocene around at least 5,000 BCE, and perhaps even in the early Holocene. It's among the world's earliest such subsistence forms. From a Pan-African perspective, pastoralism appears several millennia before crop cultivation by sedentary farmers, as summarized in the pithy phrase, cattle before crops. Now we're going to move on to the links between the Sahara and the Nigeria's Chad Basin. As the Sahara once again became drier from about 5,000 years ago, pastoralism spread its Saharan origins toward Western Africa along a northeast southwest axis. I want to read that again. Pastoralism spread from its Saharan origins towards Western Africa along a northeast southwest axis. So it's coming from the northeast region and making its way to the southwest axis. So it's making its way to places like Nigeria, Ghana, and Gabon, and places below that, right? It's making its way there. It doesn't start there, it's making its way there. This is a migration of people, pastoralists, coming into these regions, not being autochthonous to these regions. It says here, around the same time, other West African regions too see pastoral and agricultural food producing economies and associated social changes. Among the examples which have been well documented and studied are the Dahar Tachit complex in Mauritania, Ghana's Katampo culture, the inland delta, and Mali's Tlemcen Valley, with thus far earliest evidence of the aforementioned economic innovation. So this is where you first see pastoral agriculture food production. You see it in the north, and then it disseminates to the south. It says these areas are the few widely known key areas in West Africa where the socio-economic transitions between hunter-gatherer lifestyle and pastoralist and agrarian communities can be most clearly observed. Due to the high water levels in Lake Chad in the early and middle Holocene, large portions of northeastern Nigeria's Chad Basin were underwater and consequently uninhabitable during that period. Remember, we read about Lake Chad becoming mega Lake Chad during this region or time epoch, and what happened was it flooded a lot of these regions that we see inhabited today, making it uninhabitable. It says, however, hunter-gatherers and fishers lived around the shores of the lake. Their presence is attested by the find of a dugout canoe 8 meters long near the village of Dafuna, dating approximately 8,000 years ago. It represents Africa's oldest known watercraft. The invention of water travel brought human beings a variety of advantages. It enabled the use of lacustrine resources through more efficient fishing, increased mobility, and allowed the transport of objects more effectively than had been possible on land. Given such advantages, boats are certain to have been a fixture of communities living near water. Even though the next archaeological evidence of their use in Nigeria occurs only 5,000 years later during the Note culture. Paleologically and sedimentary data, in addition to climate simulations and archaeological sequencing, have established that the Holocene climates of the Sahara moved from a high humidity in the early Holocene to arid conditions in the late Holocene. Around 3000 BCE, accordingly, the southern Sahara lakes began to dry up and even enormous Lake Chad decreased. By 2000 BCE at the latest, this late Holocene aridity pushed the pastoralists living in southern Sahara into the Sahel zone of West Africa, where they initiated the beginning of a new epoch with deep socioeconomic changes. So again, remember I told you the 2000 BCE period is a very important period because during this time is when we start seeing an increase of population density in these regions, Nigeria, Ghana, so on and so forth, right? That's because you got these Saharan pastoralists moving down south from the Green Sahara regions. You can see the maps here. It says though the fusionist explanatory models are met with more skepticism today than they were in the 20th century, population movements cannot be dismissed out of hand. Let me read that again, because a lot of people, a lot of Africanists, a lot of Afrocentric, they want to treat Nigeria, they want to treat Sub-Saharan Africa or West Africa as a prison where people are given life sentences and unto perpetuity, and they never can move, they can never leave, and there's no migration, right? They're just stuck there, right? Let me read it again. Population movements cannot be dismissed out of hand. In the case of migration from the Sahara to the Sahel, the evidence is provided not only by the plausibility of climatic arguments, but also by the various finds and fine context. Strong evidence is also given by the origins of cattle and caprines such as sheep and goats. Well, how the hell do you get sheep and goats? These are domesticated. This is me talking out of the book. These are domesticates. These are domesticated. That means you need people with the know-how that come from the regions that they are known to be from to domesticate them. So when you see them at a sudden appearance in the South, in Nigeria and Chad Basin, that means the people that know how to domesticate them are with them. Watch this. It says none of these have wild ancestors south of the Sahara, but only in northern Africa and the Near East, where the domestication is attested long before their appearance in the Sahel zone. Their origins must therefore lie in the north, and because domesticated animals do not migrate alone. Let me read this. I got to read this again and again and again, because there's idiocy that reigns supreme on social media, and we have to defeat the idiocy with the information, right? It says their origins must therefore lie in the north, and because domesticated animals do not migrate alone, their owners must have migrated with them. 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 Point blank. There's nothing else you can talk about here. It's very simple. If you're going to have domesticated animals, you must need the people that domesticated them. Anyway, temporal spatial models of the spread of cattle and sheep goats throughout Africa is based on carbon-14 dates of the earliest finds. All show a similar pattern into which new finds have so far been easy to integrate. The earliest finds of domesticated cattle stem from the central and eastern Sahara and decrease in age as they move south through the sub-Saharan regions of Africa. Comparisons between finds in the Sahara Desert and the Chad Basin provides archaeological arguments for a Saharan origin of the first Chad Basin settlers after reducing Lake Chad water levels. Let me read that again. Comparisons between finds in the Sahara Desert and the Chad Basin provides archaeological arguments for a Saharan origin of the first Chad Basin settlers after reducing Lake Chad water levels. These people come from the north. It's just that simple, right? Pottery finds are particularly compelling, while ceramic finds in the Sahara are remarkably old. Pottery appears in northeastern Nigeria only from the 2nd millennium BCE onwards. That is beginning in the period in which pastoralists would have drifted south. Occasional older find dates back as early as 5000 BCE, and based on stylistic similarities, these suggest contact between the Sahara and the Sahelian Chad Basin. Such finds, however, were exceptions and did not mark a profound innovation in the life of the hunter-gatherer groups. It is only in the early 2nd millennium BCE that a significant change in pottery occurrence can be determined, likely indicating the immigration of Saharan pastoralists. Let me read that again. Likely indicating the immigration of Saharan pastoralists. So we're reading a book about the handbook of the Nigerian history, right? And this history involves migration of people coming from further north, people coming from the Green Sahara, and they coming in and inhabiting Nigeria, right? There were already an old hunter-gatherer presence there, very scant, but they were there. We likely know what haplogroups they are. What about these other people coming in? These Saharan migrants, right? Well, you get these Africanists and Afrocentrics that will try to, again, use Nigeria and use sub-Saharan Africa as a prison sentence for our ancestors, our ancient people that are known to be in that region, when we can see that these people are highly mobile and they've been migrating. We can see this through the animal domesticates that we see there, the goats and sheep. We can also see this through the cultivation, the pearl millet cultivation through the pastoralism that we see there, agro and agrarian lifestyle that we see there. I'm going to read this again. Likely indicating the immigration of Saharan pastoralists. Only from this period onwards do ceramics finds predominate numerically and can therefore be considered a fine category characteristic of the time. The resulting conclusion that the popularity of ceramic technology is linked with the arrival of Saharan migrants is bolstered by the fact that ceramics of the southern Sahara and northeastern Nigeria Sahel during this time exhibit a marked similarity of production technique and decorative patterns. However, large-scale studies systematically examine both ecological zones as to how cultural similarities arising from shared roots have yet to be attempted. The same is true for a different fine category, bifacially retouched arrowheads, most often with a concave base and edges made from various fine grain or amorphous flint variants. Such finds occur in large numbers in the Sahara, but appear more rarely in the more humid regions south of the Sahara, and they are only in the context of hypothesized immigration of Saharan populations. This suggests that the tradition of bifacially retouched arrowheads was imported southwards into the Sahel zone by migrating Saharan pastoralists. Let me stop there and give my input. Christopher Arrett even says this, that and the bow and arrow innovation comes from the north and then makes its way down to the south. Also, this is also touching on hunting, because for some reason you had Chief X saying that people would not go to the Green Sahara because they would be afraid of the animals there. Actually, that attracted people because these people were hunters. They would go in and try to hunt the hippopotamus. This is why you find the old Gobero Niger woman wearing hippopotamus bones around her neck. They made jewelry out of them. They hunted them. They ate the meat, and they did other things with the bones. So with that being said, we can see that this technology does seem to disseminate from the north down. Anyway, it says in one case, finds of this type even appear as far south as the Wetter Guinea savanna, which spread has been advanced as an argument for linking Ghana's earliest food-producing complex, the Katampo culture, to the migration of Saharan Sahel population southward. Although arrowheads suggest hunting, the archaeozoological examination of faunal remains from the Chad Basin sites at which bifacial arrowheads occur show the hunting wild animals, reptiles, and birds did not play a significant role during the time of the early agro-pastoralist communities. Either the arrowheads were used as hunting animals that are not represented in the archaeozoological record, or bows and arrows served other purposes such as hunting of predators to protect the livestock. All right, let's move on to let me see, make sure we're still online here. We didn't lose nobody. Let's move on to the next segment here. Northern Nigeria's first food producers. All right. Northern Nigeria's first food producers. In his 1978 overview of Nigeria's archaeology and early history, Thurston Shaw, then the undisputed doyen of those subjects in the country, inevitably had to resort to generalities and broad notions when discussing the earliest food producers, their plant cultivation, and the domestication of animals. Simultaneously, few concrete facts regarding the origins of food production were available, save evidence from Graham Kona's 1960s excavation of the large settlement mound of Daima on the border between Nigeria and Cameroon. Even Daima did not offer much information because the earliest layers of the 11-meter stratigraphy dated back only to the middle of the first millennium BCE, now known to be over 1,000 years after the beginning of food production in Nigeria. Today, the situation is fundamentally different, especially in northern Nigeria. Years-long research has gradually revealed a relatively precise account of the development of early food-producing cultures. Pushed southward by the Sahara's increasing aridity in the early second millennium BCE, pastoral groups found ample, unclaimed grazing lands only recently opened by the drop in Lake Chad's water levels. Let me read this again, because again, a lot of you Africans, a lot of you Afrocentrics like Garfield and Chief X are against the idea of migration, and you believe that people just were stuck in a time warp, in a time loop, and could not leave or move, and they were just there unto perpetuity, until slavery. And we're showing again and again and again that these people are highly mobile, that these people come from migrants, these people have been moving for thousands and thousands of years. And even if you've been paying attention earlier during the Younger Dryas, a lot of these periods that we associate with sub-Saharan Africans today in the Western region were not even inhabited and could not be inhabited because it was a desert and it was dry during those periods. So let me read this again. It says, pushed southward by the Sahara's increasing aridity, meaning the drying of the Sahara, right? In the early second millennium BCE, that's a poignant point here. This is a period of time. After this period of time, we start seeing developments. We start seeing an increase of population density after 2000 BCE, not before, after 2000 BCE. Pastoral groups found ample unclaimed grazing land. Unclaimed, there's nobody there. There's not large groups there. This is unclaimed. Only recently opened up by the drop in Lake Chad's water levels. Why is that important? We read earlier that Lake Chad had increased, right? And it flooded certain regions, making it uninhabitable. And the people had to live on the outskirts. When that water level dropped, it opened up areas for pastoralists so they could come in and bring in their pastoral economy and be successful and breed their animals. And they're able to feed and grow. And that's why we see population density rise after this period. And before that period, it was very, very scarce and scant in these regions. Anyway, these colonists initiated developments which, especially thanks to the unbroken continuity of ceramic development, can be tracked into the middle of the first millennium BCE. The continuity is also attested by similarities in economic and settlement patterns, burial practices, and elliptic inventory, characterized by the drive to overcome a lack of sufficient resources. The archaeological complex is called Gajiana, after the village where in 1990 the first finds were made. Phase 1 of Gajigana complex, spanning from 1800 to 1500 BCE, is characterized by pottery producing pastoralists of Saharan origins. Let me read that again, because again, I gotta keep reiterating this, right? Recapitulation is good, right? I have to keep reiterating this because I know there's people that are watching that are Africanists and that are Afrocentrics, and they want to treat these areas, the Lake Chad Basin, Ghana, they want to treat Nigeria, Cameroon as a prison sentence. People are obviously migrants, right? Let's read it again. It says phase 1 of the Gajigana complex, spanning from 1800 to 1500 BCE, is characterized by pottery producing pastoralists of Saharan origins. Phase 1 site are small and offer small quantities of finds, suggesting that they lived highly mobile lives. Let me read that last part again. These people are not static, they were not stagnant, they were not stuck. Let me read that last part again. This is what happens when you read and you study. These people don't do that. This is why they're called and labeled dilettantes. They don't care to study and they don't study. Let me read it again. Suggesting that they lived highly mobile lives. It doesn't say static lives. It doesn't say stagnant lives. It says these people were highly mobile. They moved around. Anyway, geographically, sites are concentrated around the western border of a geomorphological formation known as the Bama Deltaic Complex, consisting of seasonally flooded clay plains and slightly raised sand areas. Individual groups of pastoralists appear to have ventured further to the east, but were stopped by the still perennially flooded clay plains of the Chad Lagoon Complex. The southern border of phase 1 sites is the Bama Ridge, Lake Chad shoreline during the early and middle Holocene. It says here around 1500 BCE, the pastoral groups became sedentary, living as agro-pastoralists in small villages or hamlets, likely organized along family lines. Evidence of sedentism is provided by the appearance of settlement mounds with occupation layers up to 4 meters deep. The economic foundation of village life was the cultivation of pearl millet, the keeping of cattle, sheep, and goats, and the use of wild resources. Let me stop right there. Pearl millet is found in the north, in Mali and Mauritania. We don't see that cultivated in the south until after these people migrate. That's showing you a migratory vector and route. The keeping the cattle, we already read that earlier about the caprines, the goats, and the sheep. They come from the north. That's showing you migration from the north, right? And the use of wild resources. It says the community grew and spread as shown by the map of site distribution for this period. One local offshoot known as the Walasa group thrived on the Chad Lagoonal Complex's edge as attested by the high density of the sites there. A profound change set at the beginning of the first millennium BCE, the Gadiana Phase 2C, the dense network of village-like settlements collapsed, replaced by far smaller settlement sites with smaller fine quantities and little formation of mounds. While this suggests a return to a more mobile way of life, the plant remains show evidence of the continued cultivation of pearl millet. The change is also notable in the ceramic vessels, which lose their rich decoration and are now tempered with large organic matter. The site distribution from the first millennium BCE shows an expansion eastward towards the Chad Lagoonal Complex, which during this point must have dried up at least seasonally. The finds of the complex known as the Fergie later Stone Age differ from the contemporary groups further to the south and west, suggesting influence from other regions. Let me read that again. That went over your damn head. The finds of the complex known as the Fergie later Stone Age differ from the contemporary groups further to the south and west, suggesting influence from other regions. This is all showing migration. And what book am I reading? The Oxford Handbook of Nigerian History. What segment? This is dealing with the prehistory of Nigeria. Again, this is what reading does for you, man. Anyway, the developments occurring here in the first millennium BCE are interregional phenomena and therefore likely linked to climate changes in the environment. The other aforementioned early food producing communities in West Africa, such as the Har Tchit, Katampo, and the inland Niger Delta, end in the first millennium BCE and leave behind a period without any clearly recognizable developments. Outside of the key regions as well, such as Burkina Faso's Sahel zone, the first millennium BCE presents a mysterious lacuna in the transition from later Stone Age complexes marked by food production in a dense network of Iron Age settlements after the beginning of the Common Era. Now we're going to move on. So we start seeing these populations decrease because, again, as we read earlier, this could be a result of them being mobile, right? They're leaving Mali and they're going down south, right? Which is these people that are living in Mali are probably Mindi ancestors, right? But anyway, let's move on. The first large-scale settlements and socioeconomic changes. Significant changes occurs in northeastern Nigeria Chad Basin around 500 BCE towards the end of the Gajigana complex, phase 3. These changes can be interpreted as an early prelude to the social and economic developments towards the early empire's complexity. One of the most conspicuous developments concerns settlement size and consequent social implications during the earlier phases of the Gajigana complex. Settlements rarely extended over more than 2 or 3 hectares of space, suggesting small social communities most likely organized around family lines. However, around 500 BCE, settlements grow to a size of 10 hectares and, in some cases, even up to 30 hectares, appearing almost urban compared with earlier times. So again, we see during this period, this epoch, that West Africa goes from smallly or scantily inhabited to a 2000 BCE period where we see Saharan migrants come in. And after they come in, they give their developments and they live there for a while. We see a population boom. We see these people grow in number. Let's read that again. It says, however, around 500 BCE, settlements grow to a size of 10 hectares and, in some cases, even up to 30 hectares, appearing almost urban compared with earlier times. In the well-studied site of Xylem, the size of the settlement, the number of the household items and structures, and the number of ceramic finds in particular indicate a population over 1,000. Apart from even larger settlements built during the second millennium BCE at the Har Tchit in Mauritania, very few cases of such a large number of people living in one place simultaneously are known in sub-Saharan Africa prior to state formation. Read that again. Again, 2000 BC is an important period. That's because before the innovations come in, before pastoralism, before agrarian lifestyle come in, these areas were scantily populated. They come in, they bring in the innovations, they're able to sustain population growth, they're able to feed more people. Then we start seeing West Africa be, going into the vector, are going into the early stages to lead it to where it is today. We don't see that to after 2000 BC. We don't see that to after migration plays a part in bringing these innovations, pastoralism, and agrarian lifestyle. So very few cases, such as a large number of people living in one place simultaneously, are known in sub-Saharan Africa prior to state formation. The large number of inhabitants ensured a large supply of laborers for large-scale collaborative projects and many settlements at the time. One such project was digging a trench of several meters depth and width, fully encircling the settlement. Some features have indicated that settlements were also surrounded by walls and ramparts in addition to trenches. The only convincing explanation for the function of such construction is fortification. In the middle of the 1st century BCE, and during the final stage of the later Stone Age, farmers in the Nigerian Chad Basin first constructed fortified settlements. So I wanted to speak on this real quick because, Afrocentric Africans, they live in La La Land. One of the things they do, they believe that, Africans were peaceful. You don't need bombardments around your home if everything's, peachy, everything is copacetic and everybody's nice, everything's rainbows and marshmallows. You don't need this. Obviously, people are protecting themselves for a reason here, whether it be from wild animals or whether it be from rival tribes. We don't have time machines to show that, but we can see that they did have bombardments around their damn house. And we see this repeated again in history during the slave trade period. You had different African tribes that would bombard their houses because people would run in their house, take their daughters and sell other Africans, by the way, because y'all believe that, these people would not do any harm to them. Shut up. They would put bombardments around the house and they'd come in, snatch their young, snatch people and sell them into slavery. Back then, we could see bombardments in the house. This is in the archaeological record. They obviously were protecting themselves. It says here, the reason for this considerable expense of labor is linked to economic advances. The settlement contained numerous underground storage pits and large vessels of up to a meter in height, occurring in the region for the first time and likely used for storage. Storage pits and storage vessels suggest a successful economic system. Evidently, the inhabitants of the large settlements produced substantial surplus in their cultivation of pearl millet and cowpea. The cowpea represented a new extension of subsistence agriculture and therefore potentially contributing to the surplus. And again, pearl millet comes from the north and cowpea comes from the Near East, right? These are cultivated plants. Cultivation is a human activity. You need people with the know-how, or at least teach you or show you how to cultivate these crops, especially when they come from foreign regions. It says here, the concentration of large numbers of peoples and food storage in a fortified place is not a sign of peaceful times. Instead, it should be assumed that attacks and conflicts were constant threats. Let me read that again for you kumbaya niggas and you people that believe that West Africa was just inundated with these heart-filled, peaceful, rainbow and marshmallow people. No, when we see these fortified houses and bombardments and these things to keep people out, it's usually a sign that it's conflict going on. It's usually a sign of war. It's not safe there. So let me read that again because you guys live in fairy tale land. And I have to yank you out of the matrix, man. The concentration of large numbers of people in food storage in a fortified place is not a sign of peaceful times. Instead, it should be assumed that attacks and conflicts were constant threats. Another significant development concerns social differentiation. It is difficult to imagine the construction of fortifications without leadership to plan construction as a necessary reaction to the uncertain times and oversee the completion of work. Division of labor and specialization also seem to have been in place, as the large quantities of finds, particularly ceramics, cannot be explained without reference to professional craftsmen. This insight comes from the Mayabe site on the Nigeria-Cameroon border. The site measures approximately 10 hectares and is dated to, like Xylem, to 500 BCE. Suppose the number of excavated ceramic finds extrapolated to encompass the entire settlement. In that case, the resultant figure is above 1 million pots produced in not much more than a century. Such mass production indicates at least spatial specialization in the production of ceramic vessels for a larger market. It is equally likely that specialists ensured a sufficient supply of stone tools, particularly grinding stones and stone axes. Ever since the pastoral beginnings of the settlements in northeastern Nigeria's Chad Basin in the early 2nd century BCE, the settlers had been faced with the absence of stone. Depending on the region, deposits of suitable lithic raw materials are 80 to 200 kilometers from the settlements. In the early phases, people simply procured stone from the nearest available deposit, possibly by journeying to the deposit themselves as needed. However, around 500 BCE, a reorganization of this system occurs. Raw materials now come from various different deposits, not merely the nearest one, and stone tools of unprecedented numbers begin to appear in the settlements. Such apparently efficient supply of the market with a rare material might have been solved by a carefully organized system of exchange, perhaps even managed by full-time experts. It is even conceivable that these experts were the early forerunners of professional merchants. For only a few centuries later, West African merchants were running a fully developed trans-Saharan trade network. And we covered that before when we did West African history last year during Black History Month. We covered those expansive trans-Saharan trade networks that the West Africans were associated with. It's mainly in the Common Era. It says here, large-scale settlements in the middle of the 1st century BCE led to profound changes affecting nearly all aspects of human life at the time. These changes include developments that will later become characteristic of various larger empires and states, a productive economy, population growth, and the cohabitation of large number of people in one place, as well as social changes comprising the development of a hierarchical system and craft specialization. Craft specialization includes the somewhat later occurrence of iron metallurgy, which has been established for the large settlement of Malankari, slightly younger than the others discussed here. The same period sees the creation of fire clay sculptures, primarily representing animals. While similar sculptures had existed since the beginning of the Gajigana complex, they now take on more elaborate forms. Such a large number of roughly contemporary developments might be considered to indicate outside influence, but the material culture of the large settlements in which these innovations occurred stands in the preceding phases tradition. The changes cannot therefore be explained by the immigration of new populations. Rather, the continuity in almost all finds and categories provides evidence that the inhabitants of the large settlements were descendants of those living in the earlier phases of the Gajigana complex. Although the settlements appear as a transition into a new era, they represent the Gajigana complex in the northeastern Nigeria. The last centuries before the Common Era turn are characterized by an almost total absence of archaeological finds. The mysterious dearth of data for this period is a supra-regional phenomenon. All right, so these people come in, they migrate from the Sahara, they make these developments, they go through a population boom, and we see a development of certain things that are novel to these groups that came to this area. So let's move on to the first forms and the roots of art in central Nigeria. And this is going to be the most interesting. Let me make sure we're still online. Because a lot of people bring up the Nok. A lot of people bring in the Nok. And they discuss the Nok culture and they know a little about the Nok culture. So let's read about it. Let's understand the Nok culture. That's why they're bringing up art, because the Nok culture are known for their clay figurines. It says, during roughly the same period that saw sedentism and pearl millet cultivation arises among Chad Basin pastoralists of the early phases of the Gajigana complex, similar developments were occupying in central Nigeria. In the region between the cities of Abuja, Jos, and Kaduna, an archaeological complex developed whose origins can be tracked into the second half of the first millennium BCE. Like its counterpart in Chad Basin, it ended abruptly without apparent descendants in the late first millennium BCE. It is characterized by anthropomorphic and, in some cases, zoomorphic sculptures of fired clay terracotta. The complex was named the Nok culture after the village near which the first finds were made. The artistic sculptures are the oldest finds of this kind in sub-Saharan Africa, and as such, they have attracted attention far beyond archaeological circles. Indeed, as the Nok culture has become one of Africa's most interesting archaeological complexes before state formation, the sculptures have been greatly in demand in the international art market, leading to years of devastating destruction and looting of Nok culture sites by illicit digging. Originally, the Note cultures was deemed an early Iron Age complex and dates from 500 BCE to 200 CE due to co-occurrences of iron smelting furnaces and terracotta fragments at the Taruga site. However, more recent searches have revised the view of the Note culture. Numerous radiocarbon datings of charred plant remains, as well as detailed chronology of ceramic styles, indicate a radically different timeline than originally proposed. The Note culture is now revealed to have begun around 1500 BCE, a full millennium earlier than the initially estimated and long before the advent of iron metallurgy. And I have to say, this is before the advent of iron metallurgy, because there are people online like Garfield that try to say that Nigerians were the first people spelling iron. And we're going to get into that later on. It's going to discuss that. The advent of iron in West Africa is fairly new compared to the rest of the earth. They were not doing it before the Anatolians, the Mycop culture and stuff of that nature. And we're going to deal with the radiocarbon evidence here later that tries to say that they were doing this at 3000 BCE, and some places say 9700 BCE. It just does not fit with everything else. But anyway, this is long before the advent of metallurgy, this 1500 BCE. So nor is the Note culture any longer defined by its terracotta sculptures, but rather by the pottery with its characteristic decoration of incisions and impressions. Such pottery finds span from the beginning of the Note culture to its disappearance in the late first millennium BCE. The Note culture therefore lasted 1.5 millennia, more than twice as long as initially suggested. It is no longer the uniform complex marked by terracotta sculpture and iron metallurgy, but a rather gradual development with successfully occurring innovations that span the later Stone Age and Iron Age to use the traditional periodic system. The origins of the Note culture are unclear. Let me just say that again, because most people think they do know the origins of the Note culture, and they think it's a toxin element that always been in West Africa. But here it is. The origins of the Note culture are unclear. Throughout its distribution area, no evidence of autochthonous development has yet come to light. There's nothing there to insinuate that these group of individuals that made the Note culture are autochthonous to the region we find them. They're not original to that region. They're not indigenous. For many of the reasons that we read earlier. We read earlier a lot of these places were flooded. We read earlier that these places are scantily populated until recently, that we don't start seeing population boom and population density until after 2000 BCE, when we start seeing these populations pop up. It says here, the only finds before the beginning of the Note culture consist of an undated inventory of microlithic tools attributed to hunter-gatherers. The earliest Note culture people must therefore have immigrated to the central Nigerian region. Let me read that again. The earliest Note culture people must have. I'm gonna end the show, bro. It's redundant at this point, man. But recapitulation is needed. The earliest Note culture people must therefore have immigrated to the central Nigerian region. While it may be far-fetched to posit a Saharan origin for Note settlers akin to the Gajiana complex, it is at least probable that the Note culture had its roots in the Sahel to the north, giving that pearl millet, which was cultivated throughout the Note culture's time, is native to the Sahel. Let me read that again. See, there's no evidence that they are autochthonous, but there's evidence that they come from somewhere else. It said it is at least probable that the Note culture had its roots in the Sahel to the north, giving that pearl millet, which was cultivated throughout the Note culture's time, is native to the Sahel. It is unknown whether the people of the Note culture kept animals, immigrated with cattle like the Chad Basin pastoralists, or hunted to meet their dietary need for meat. The reason for this lack of knowledge is the acidic tropical soil in which bones are not preserved. Among the animals occasionally depicted by a terracotta sculpture, not one is domesticated. Instead, the sculptures portray snakes, birds, monkeys, or quadrupeds without distinguishing characteristics. The early Note phase lasted between 500 and 600 years and was followed by the Middle Note phase, lasting into the 4th century BCE, during which the Note culture reached the zenith of its development. Settlement densities reaches the highest point during this phase in the core research area near Janjala village. There is hardly a square kilometer without a Middle Note site. It is difficult to determine whether the sites were settlements or had different functions. This is because, except for waste pits, the sites, the sites themselves contain very few features and provide little data about settlement structure and housing. It says this is because, except for waste pits, the sites themselves contain very few features, provide little data about settlement structure and housing. There is no evidence of houses constructed to last over long periods, and as dwellings were constructed not of stone but of degradable organic materials. No significant evidence remains except for some remnants of daub with wattle imprints. The interpretation of no sites is made additionally difficult by the intermixture of material or different ages. In-depth analysis of individual sites has revealed that the sites were used repeatedly and possibly for different purposes. For example, at the sites of Pangwari, people of the Middle Noak phase seem to have returned to an abandoned early Noak settlement to perform funeral rites and bury terracotta sculptures in the ground. The sites extend only over small areas and nowhere have occupation layers of more than 30 to 40 centimeters formed. Fine quantities are Fine quantities are small and consist largely of pot shards, fragments of terracotta, and occasionally stone artifacts, and fine quantities are comparatively small. Small fine loads, small fine areas, few features, and rare groundwork size indicate a relatively small degree of human activity. It's likely that the number of inhabitants of each site was small and that there only a few huts or houses stood on each site rather than remaining in one place for generations. No settlers remained only briefly, possibly due to rapidly depleted soil and consequent shift in cultivation. All these suggest a settlement system with small individual farmsteads and scattered settlements. The settlements were probably occupied by largely autonomous family groups. They were surrounded by their own fields, which bordered on those of their neighbors. They shared common identity through cultural traditions, which included the use of terracotta sculptures. The earliest terracotta sculptures appeared in the early 9th century BCE in the early Middle Note phase. They show no recognizable development out of more simple forerunners, but appear fully formed in their typical style. Their further development cannot be tracked due to the so-called Hallstatt plateau of the 14 carbon calibration curve. The plateau results are that organic material from between 800 BC and 400 BC cannot be precisely radiocarbon dated. After the Hallstatt plateau and the late Nock phase after 400 BCE, terracotta sculptures tradition appears already in decline. Only a few terracotta finds can be securely dated to that period. 2 points indicate that the time window in which the terracotta sculptures were manufactured was brief, perhaps even less than a theoretical maximum of 500 years. Both points concern the uniformity of the sculptures. The first point is the lack of stylistic development. Whenever an object affords great creative or decorative freedom, it will undergo stylistic changes if produced over several centuries, no matter how conservative its manufacturing guidelines. The Nook sculptures, however, show no such development. Indeed, the many sculptures thus far recovered from ascertained fine context comprise a small set of recurring motifs and have a homogeneous appearance. No conventional life cycle with phases of development, flowering, and decline can be identified. One possible explanation would be to consider the sculptures as a suddenly appearing phenomena that served a particular purpose for some few generations and then fell from fashion. The second point concerning the sculptures' uniformity concerned the technical aspects of their manufacture. The in-section analysis and X-ray fluorescence analysis have revealed that the clay from different sculptures has a strikingly uniform geochemical composition. This observation was initially explained by positing central workshops, but no archaeological evidence of such workshops have been found. Instead, the existence of wandering craftsmen is now considered more probable. Specialist craftsmen would have known the land through their travels, knowing their necessary clay deposits might be found, and using their expertise and experience to manufacture terracotta sculptures as needed for those living in the dispersed settlements. Evidently, the manufacturers needed to fulfill rigid stylistic norms and rules governing the use of particular clay. Hereto, it is difficult to imagine how such norms can have been strictly maintained over a long period, given that as evidenced by the large market in modern Noak forgeries. Clay of vastly different geochemical compositions are just as suitable for the technical manufacture of terracotta sculptures. Several arguments then suggest that Noak sculptures were a brief phenomenon during the early first millennium BCE. Does not alter the fact that the terracotta figures still represent the oldest large-sized sculptures in West Africa. What of this makes them the origins of flourishing variety of sculptural artistic traditions, how these traditions develop, and how they are linked remain central themes in African art history. How the first large-size sculptures in sub-Saharan Africa were used has always been a central aspect of Noak research. One supposition was of the shrine standing in the farmer's field in which the sculptures were meant to ensure a rich harvest. Others accorded the sculptures an architectural function as decoration and capstone on the round straw roofs of huts. Terracotta sculptures found in settlements with iron smelting furnaces inspired ideas of religio-magical rites during the smelting process. Smaller sculptures were seen as amulets or pendants in the representation of sick people invoked in healing rituals. Snakes, the animal most commonly represented on the sculptures, have been interpreted as signs of a snake coat, and other animals as signs of hunting rituals. The speculations go as far as a temple decoration or commissions from rulers who had gained their economic position through iron production control. All these ideas were necessity speculative. Hardly any of the suppositions rested on fine context as actual excavated sites. Today, the situation is different. In the course of excavations performed on Noak sites since 2005, two features attained a key role in searching for interpretation of terracotta sculptures. I want to stop here and just give some insight because there was 93 said something about pretending. We're just pretending, or um, we're speculating. So that's majority of the field. We don't have time machines. We can't go do personal interviews with these people and say, hey, why did you use this terracotta? Why did you make this sculpture? What was its use for? Is it religious? Is it decorative? Why do you have this? Is it just to make things look pretty? We don't have that. So all you can do is dig this stuff up and then infer. That's all you can do. That's majority of our anthropological studies, our archaeology, and majority of science and DNA and genomics. You can't do personal interviews with these people to find out why they actually did something. And there is no, this is a pre-literate society. There's no written records. This is how you have to do most of this stuff. If you don't like that, then you're dealing with the wrong fields. These fields are not extreme empiricism, even though they deal with empirical data, but they draw emphasis on the empirical finds. That's all they can do. What do you expect from these people? You're in the wrong field. Anyway, it says here, two features attain a key role in searching for an interpretation of the terracotta sculptures. One feature involved deposits of terracotta in the form of several large fragments of different sculptures purposely buried underground. The individual fragments cannot be reconstructed into complete sculptures. Evidently, only parts of the figures were deposited in the ground. It's not known what happened to the remaining fragments. In some cases, the sculptures had been placed on a bed of stones, while other stones had been placed between individual fragments of terracotta, making it look as though the stones had been used to break the sculptures and then discarded along with the terracotta. On occasion, large amounts of charcoal lay among the sculptures, providing evidence that fire played some role in their disposal. The other feature lending to the better understanding of the function of the terracotta sculpture has been graves. Because no bones of the buried person have been preserved in the acidic soil, graves can be identified only by grave goods and arrangements of larger stones, including grinding stones, most often placed upright. The grave goods consist of finely worked ceramic vessels, appearing either alone or in pairs. In some cases, burial pits differing in color from the surrounding soil, and necklaces of many stone beads bolster the interpretation of such finds as graves. Another proof of the hypothesis interpreting the sites as graves was furnished by X-ray fluorescent analysis of the featured soil. The analysis established that the soil contained remnants of decayed organic matter. Large-scale excavations of Noak sites have revealed spatial proximity between graves and deposits of terracotta sculptures. This link first became apparent at the Pongwari site, where graves of the types described above were identified only a few meters from a particularly rich trove of terracotta sculptures. The excavation in a different location yielded the same spatial proximity of the two features. The link between grave sites and sculptures deposits proved particularly clear at the Ifana site. A small excavation there in 2011 yielded a deposit of 7 large terracotta fragments. Further excavations in the immediate surroundings in 2016 unearthed 22 graves with the 3 further deposits of, in some cases, large numbers of terracotta finds. A link between graves and Noak sculptures had been suggested based on ethnographic analogies. The unearthed finds leave no further doubts. The terracotta sculptures were part of the complex funeral rituals. It is possible that large anthropomorphic figures function as representations of the deceased at a funeral gatherings. Though many questions remain unanswered, including how the sculptures were fragmented, why the fragments are omnipresent at nearly all sites, it can now be taken as certain that complex funeral rites involving large sculptures first appeared in Nigeria in the first millennium BCE. After approximately 1,000 years, the early farming communities in northern and central Nigeria experienced another innovation: iron metallurgy, introduced in the last phase of prehistoric developments before state formation. Iron metallurgy has been linked with the no culture ever since the discovery by Bernard Bogg in the 1960s. So the next segment is going to be very interesting because there's been claims about iron, and we know that iron is a late innovation. Late innovation in Western Africa. Yes, this is the Nook. We just dealt with the Nook, the sculptures. And I just want to bring out another point here. People are like, inferring here, inference. You have to use inference. You can't do personal interviews with these people. You can't go back in time. You can't do none of those things, man. Come on, man. Stop it. You can't go back in time and like sit down and say, "Oh, so why did you build these terracottas? What is the purpose of them? Did you sacrifice anybody to them? How did you keep this code?" You can't do that. You guys are silly, man. You have to deal with some level of inference. Anyway, iron, the origins of technological innovation. After food production, metal as a material is the next great turning point in human prehistory. It has long been debated to what degree metallurgy has contributed to the development of early complex societies with all its attendant economic and social implications. However, that metallurgy represents a technological revolution does not preclude the possibility that initial appearance of iron among the people of Nigeria changed little about their lives at first. It's likely that significant changes in everyday life set in only with the diffusion of iron smelting technology and more common availability of iron objects. Just as there are significant differences in the first appearance of food production in Africa compared with the neighboring Europe and Near East, the first metals in human use also differ widely. In the Near East and in Europe, the production and use of copper, bronze, and iron form a progression comprising several millennia. In Africa, by contrast, smiths in the first millennium BCE began to smelt iron apparently spontaneously and without the experience of other metals. Except for a few local cases, iron saw no copper or bronze forerunners. And that's the weird thing about West Africa. They go straight to iron. They don't have the natural progression of copper, bronze, and then iron. They go straight to iron. And, I believe it's because they're getting this stuff from the migrants, because they are the migrants. They're the descendants of the migrants. They already had these ideas and understanding because they come from a population that already did this. Anyway, in Africa, rather, iron metallurgy and its many varieties developed directly out of the epoch tradition, traditionally categorized as the Stone Age. Such a trajectory raises the question of the new technology's origin. Was it imported to Africa by foreigners, or was it independently invented by Africans? The Africanists will say independently invented by Africans. And when they say Africans, they're not talking about North Africa. They're talking about Western African Nigeria. That's what they're saying. It says, so far, the question remains unresolved due to the comparative dearth of solidly established data surrounding the beginnings of iron production in Africa. Individual finds are dating Africa's iron metallurgy back as early as the 3rd millennium BCE. This was brought up in one of Garfield's show that they were the first people smelting this. But again, it says unresolved. Why? Because there's a problem with those data points, right? It says, thus suggesting our toxins development, given that such datings would be the earliest worldwide. Finds from the Nigerian site Elijah can be dated to similarly earlier period. However, most other evidence from various areas of Africa is clustered in the 1st millennium BCE. So I'm going to stop right there and give my input. If we already had these developments in Nigeria, and again, this is before 2000 BCE when we start seeing population density grow, but it's before all that. You're putting it 5,000 years ago? That makes no sense. Why do we see most of the developments in the 1st millennium BCE? 1000 BCE onward. It says, from a chronological point of view, these sites do not answer the question of origins, but they produce a consistent picture of the progression of and links between social and economic developments. Food producing communities were well established by the 1st millennium BCE, and the gradual gradual development of craft specialization during this period can be considered advantageous to new skills such as smithing. So that makes sense. We see food producing coming in, we see a need for iron metallurgy, and then it pops up. You putting in 3000 BCE, and some people say 9,700 years ago. So that's shit. 6,700 BC. What? What is the utilization of that? What is it for? Watch this. It says, by contrast, it is difficult to conceive how iron metallurgy could arise before establishing sedentary food-producing farmers. The above datings of 2000 BCE and earlier would, according to current knowledge, necessitate iron production among hunter-gatherers. You can't answer that question. What if they had it that early? What the hell were they using it for? And it wasn't that many people in Nigeria during that time. There was no need for it. You can't answer that. It makes more sense. It's more plausible to go with the dates of first millennium onward, because that's when we see all those developments that necessitate iron metallurgy. You don't have it back then. You have it after 1000 BC, So that just kills it. And if anybody's familiar with those studies that say that they only use charcoal, and the charcoal dates, they don't use anything to corroborate with it. And we know charcoal can have the old wood effect, which is probably why you're producing these older dates going all the way back to 9,700 years before present. That's just, get the hell out of here. Anyway, in studies of iron metallurgy beginnings in Africa, the Note culture is regularly cited as among the earliest reliable evidence of iron production. Today, Note iron, particularly slags and furnaces, has been thoroughly studied, and a large number of charcoal samples associated with iron finds have been radiocarbon dated. So after it goes after these, those data points that are used to say that Nigeria was the first people iron smelting, it goes straight after that and say, well, the first reliable evidence is with the Note culture, and we know the Note culture started in 1500. They didn't start off with iron smelting; they get it later. That's way after 3000 BCE or 9,700 years ago, and all those other crazy numbers you get, which is probably an effect of the old wood effect, where you're getting those radiocarbon numbers from the date of that wood, not actually when the activity of iron smelting was happening. Anyway, let's read that again, just to hurt the hearts and feelings of the Africanists and Afrocentrics that may be watching. In the studies of iron metallurgy beginnings in Africa, the Note culture is regularly cited as among the earliest reliable evidence of iron production. Today, Note iron, particularly slag and furnaces, has been thoroughly studied, and a large number of charcoal samples associated with the iron finds have been radiocarbon dated. As with the terracotta sculptures, many of these dating samples fall within the Hallstatt plateau of the 14 carbon calibration curve between 840 BCE, making more precise dating impossible. However, the samples most likely ages tended towards the younger end of the plateau, a fact that accords with the perceived link between iron slag finds and pottery styles with a similar range of probable dates. And that's the difference. This is why this is more reliable, is because they have something else to compare the dates to. They have something that can corroborate the point, the data point, not just a data point in a vacuum in isolation. It says here, therefore, there seems reason to suppose that the Note culture's iron smelting in the consequent period of momentous technological innovation did not occur much before the 7th century BCE. Let me read that again. I know it's going to hurt people's feelings. Therefore, there seems reason to suppose that the Note culture's iron smelting in the consequent periods of momentous technological innovation did not occur much before the 7th century BCE. Following this, it is clear that the production of Note sculptures was not shaped by iron smelting. If one influenced the other, then sculptures affected the iron production, not the other way around. Iron, however, was not enough to save the Note culture from its decline in the second half of the first millennium BCE. Only a short time after the advent of metallurgy, signs of Note culture become rare, disappearing fully by the end of the millennium at the latest. One potential reason may be the climatic and consequent environmental changes to which the Note culture people could not adapt. The last centuries before the rise of the empires. Real quick, I love hurting feelings, man. Somebody told me that before. You like hurting black people's feelings. I love hurting feelings because you just got to get slapped with reality sometimes. Black Hebrews like slapped with reality. Afrocentric, Africanists. I'm here to slap you with reality. That's all I'm here to do, man. slap you guys with reality, and maybe a few people might learn from it. The last centuries before the rise of the empires. There is a break in the archaeological record between the Note culture and the subsequent period before the first empires arose. Sites in the early first millennium CE show many changes that stand in no connection with the Note culture. There are, for example, no immediate successors to the Note culture's terracotta sculptures. The ceramic vessels now decorated with rowlette patterns seem a world away from the Note culture's incisions and impressions. The prevailing diet changed as well, with previously unused plants such as oil palm and fonio representing a valuable complement. Fonio comprises two cultivated types of grass of the genus Dicoteria and is still consumed in Nigeria today as a dish known as aka. It remains unclear whether this cultural and economic break occurred due to demographic shifts or the spread of different cultural framework. Similarly, it is still an open question how the communities succeeding the Note culture develop in detail. Then, as now, the millennium from the end of the Note culture to the beginnings of the earliest empires remains a largely understudied period in the region's prehistory. By contrast, the last centuries before the first empire's onset in the Chad Basin have received far closer attention. Initially, the Dama settlement mound was interpreted as a reference point for nearly seamless development of Iron Age settlements from its beginning in the early first millennium CE into the second millennium CE. Today, almost all of Nigeria's Chad Basin has been archaeologically surveyed. A comparison between the site distribution of Gajigana settlements on the one hand and the later sites on the other reveals that the region was completely and evenly settled during the Common Era. So we don't get a full fleshed out Nigeria, or at least the Chad Basin, until the Common Era comes. Right? West African history is fairly new compared to Egypt or the Near East or even Europe as far as developments go. I mean, that's just the case. And why is it? Because we don't start seeing people that bring in the innovations into 2000 BCE. We don't start seeing that to that period. That's what all the evidence is showing us. So of course they're going to be Johnny come lately when it comes to state formation and stuff of that nature, because those things take time to develop and gradually grow into, which the Near East already had that. Greece and parts of Europe already had that prior to. There's nothing to be sad about. Oh, you're hurting people's feelings. Who cares? Like, is that the truth or not? You guys are worried about your feelings. You need to be worried about the reality of the subject. I thought we was in it for the research. I thought we was in it to be scholars. You in it because of your feelings? That's an appeal to emotion. It says here, this may be interpreted as a sign of economic stability in which the use of iron likely played a part. Iron finds are not very frequent, but evenly spaced out across the region. Evidence for local iron production comes only from very young sites. This is probably, as in the case of the still high demand for stone as working materials for axe and grinding stones due to the absence of local ore deposits. Instead, iron and iron objects found their way to the Chad Basin through trade and commerce, and ironwork was limited to the resmithing and alteration of these objects. The period considered here is marked by both tradition and innovation. I also want to make notation on that as well. You have to be able to get the iron ore out the goddamn ground. And if I have to explain to you why that is important, slap yourself. I'm not going to. Let's keep going. Just as the Note culture area, Chad Basin pottery of the first millennium CE is so distinct from its precedents that migration in a population shift cannot be ruled out. Let me just, before we end. The Chad Basin pottery of the first millennium CE is so distinct from its predecessors that migration and population shift cannot be ruled out. Y'all hate that word migration and population shift because y'all want to make it seem as if Africa's unchanging, nobody moved, it's a prison, you was always there. You want to say all these things, but none of the evidence points towards that direction. It says the region's subsistence agriculture too has changed to include sorghum as an important cultivated plant. The settlement patterns, however, seem unchanged even by a hiatus of several centuries. In the first millennium BCE tradition, we continue to see large settlements now of up to almost 50 hectares, but still ringed by deep trenches and possibly fortified. While it remained an open question whether settlements of such size can be referred to as urban, the projected population size of 5,000 to 10,000 inhabitants indicates the profound economic, social, and possibly political changes of an increasingly increasingly complex world. These developments are not a regional peculiarity of the Chad Basin. However, rather the first millennium CE sees similar developments across many West African regions, in some cases with astounding simultaneity. This may be because the expanse of West Africa's savannas represented in Graham's Conus words an optimal zone for the rise of an early African civilizations and an immediate precedents. In summary, a significant cultural change can be identified in the Chad Basin over the first millennium CE course. 2 millennia of agro-pastoral land use provide a solid foundation for an intensive, productive agricultural economy that transforms the natural environment into a cultivated landscape shaped by human influence. This development was undoubtedly aided by iron metallurgy and its consequent new tools, likewise rooted in the previous millennium. Trade and commerce continue to provide the region with the necessary associated resources, including stone. Large, probably fortified settlements with high population densities form the apex of hierarchical settlement systems, likewise rooted in the first millennium BCE, and representing a social innovation with the consequent new communal life forms. The rise of civic and state societies appears a logical continuation of these early developments, although the actual process of state development is difficult to reconstruct by archaeological means. Let's get to the conclusion. From the second millennium BCE to the first millennium CE, a wide variety of developments occur in modern day Nigeria. These developments first began as a result of migration. Let me read that again. These developments first began as the results of migration. All right, so should I end it there, man? Because I don't get it. Like, I'm dealing with too many dum-dums. I'm dealing with too many dilettantes at this point. This is why nobody wants to debate. Now, when you call somebody out, hey, debate that. Debate that sub-Saharan Africans were isolated and static for millennia. Debate it. Nobody wants to do it. But these are the claims they're making. Debate that the Sahara is impenetrable and nobody can cross it and nobody ever did. Nobody wants to do it. Garfield, Chief X, nobody wants to do it. Because they know they will get crushed, killed, and destroyed every round and every point. Let me read that again, man. Let me read that again. This is what reading does for you. From the second millennium BCE to the first millennium CE, a wide variety of developments occurred in modern day Nigeria. These developments first began as the results of migration and are viewed as fundamental preconditions for state formation. These developments include productive agriculture, first relying on the cultivation of pearl millet and cowpea, besides animal husbandry and hunting before being eventually supplemented by sorghum, fonio, and oil palm in the later period. Now, stop real quick. Again, pearl millet was cultivated in the north. Cowpea is coming from the Near East. It's coming from the Southwest Asian crop. Obviously, this is showing migration. Anyway, sedentism and development of, what did it say earlier? These developments first began as the results of migration. Sedentism and the development of village-like settlement patterns, which in individual regional cases grew into proto-urban large-scale settlements. An increase in population and corresponding social changes, including hierarchical structures and craft specialization. The technological revolution of manufacturing iron and iron products, and as we spent some time on this, it does not come in 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. That's nonsense. The development of exchange systems to trade to supply certain resources in order to cover regional shortfalls, and the rise of complex rites likely linked to burial and ancestor worship as evidenced by the creation of artistic terracotta objects. These developments are evident in the two described and well-studied examples given above, the Gajigana and the Nok. It is quite likely that similar processes occurred in parallel in other regions of Nigeria. Study of these remains a task for future scholarship. And that's the chapter, man. And that's the motherfucking deal. So you guys should be well educated on Nigeria's prehistory. Any questions? Any questions? Do we got any Africanists in the house? What Africanists at? Show me some Africanness. Where you Afrocentrics at? They want to claim everybody just stayed there. There's no migration, it's stagnant. Where y'all at? Where y'all at, man? Is any of y'all in the house, man? I know y'all hate watch the channel all the time. I know y'all hate watch this channel. So where y'all hiding it, man? Show your faces, man. A higher be praised says, why would they debate something they know they can't defend? My thing is, you know you can't defend it. Why do you keep yelling it and streaming it on all your damn lives? If you know you can't defend it, right? You know you can't defend it. We see these population booms happen after 2000 BCE. It's not that old. Then these populations were created what we see today in West Africa. Well, who benefited from these advantageous innovations? E1B1A, E1B1A, RV88. Freedom that never went nowhere argument is biological determinism, man. Scientific racism, bro. And this mentioned the Sahara, the desiccation of the Sahara. So let's touch on that real quick. ISOC said many moons ago the origin of E1B1A, even though sub-Saharan Africa does not just comprise of E1B1A, but that's usually the hot topic, right? So ISOC 2009, they made it clear. E1B1A is an African lineage that probably extended from North African to Sub-Saharan and Equatorial African with the Bantu agricultural expansion. And we see all this evidence that migration is coming from the north. Right? We see all this evidence. So then let's go to the history of male migration in and out of the Green Sahara. We see the earlier clades of E1B1A. And remember, we read earlier that we don't see population density in these areas before 10,000 years ago. It was too goddamn dry. It was too dry in these regions to sustain populations. Right? We started seeing it open up after the Green Sahara. That's where you see these clays. This green area is the development of these clays, EM78, RV88, EM78, A3M113. They were all harboring in the Green Sahara. And then later on, you see these population booms from the Bantu coming out of these populations that migrated from the Green Sahara. As you can see, look, they're all scattering all different regions. That's why you see what we call sub-Saharan lineages in the north. And why you also see sub-Saharan lineages like E1B1A all the way in fucking France. And not just that, you look at the mitochondrial DNA, L2A1, L3F, they're all in France, Spain, fucking Germany. How are they getting there? They're in the Near East, they're in Syria because these people are migrating. Let's go down here real quick. Let's read this real quick. Hold on. The insights from the Green Saharan Y chromosome findings. It is widely accepted that the sub-Saharan Y chromosomes are dominated by EM2 lineages carried by Bantu-speaking farmers that expanded from West Africa starting less than 5,000 years ago, reaching South Africa within recent centuries. The EM2 Bantu lineages lie phylogenetically within the EM2 Green Sahara lineage and show at least 3 explosive lineages expansions beginning 4.9, 5.3 thousand years ago. And this also explains why the Bantu were able to bring and conquer with agrarian pastoral packages. They already knew this because they descend from people that come from the Sahara, that come from North Africa, that already understood pastoralism and agrarian lifestyles. It's simple to explain this shit. When you start dealing with demic diffusions, when you deal with the movement of people instead of just culture and ideas. It says these events of EM2 Bantu expansion are slightly later than the RV88 expansion and highlight the range of male demographic changes in mid-Holocene. That's what we see. When you look at sub-Saharan Africa today, when you look at Western and Central Africa, you see EM2, you see RV88, you see EM78, you see these same clades. It says north of the Sahara, in addition to the 4 trans-Saharan haplogroups, haplogroup EM81, which diverged from EM78 13,000 years ago, became very common in present-day populations as a result of another massive expansion approximately 2,000 years ago. Although Y chromosomes exist within populations and so share and reflect the general history of those populations, they can sometimes show some departures from other parts of the genome that result from differences in male and female behaviors. Atanasio highlights one such contrast in a study. Present-day North African population shows substantial sub-Saharan autosomal and mtDNA genetic components ascribed to the Roman and Arab slave trades 1 to 2,000 years ago. Because a lot of times what people say is, we say, well, these sub-Saharan markers are actually found outside of sub-Saharan Africa. Their recourse or their response is always going to be, oh, that's because of slavery. Well, the Arab slave trade was mainly female. Mainly female. So watch this. Or they even bring the Romans, right? It says, but carry few sub-Saharan wild lineages from this source. So while we don't see that much male introgression, we only see female and autosomal introgression. We don't see much male from this slave trade period, from the Arabic slave trade and the Romans. It says, but carry few sub-Saharan wild lineages from this source, probably reflecting the smaller number of male slaves and their reduced reproductive opportunity. That's just a nice way to say that what these Arabs were doing during this time. They were castrating the male slaves. So how the hell are they going to have progeny? Right? When you compare it to those of the female slaves. The sub-Saharan Y chromosomes in these North African populations thus originate predominantly from the earlier Green Sahara period. And this all works harmoniously with what we read, that these people migrated from the north down into these regions we see them in today. Into these regions that we see them today. And again, this is not just E1B1A, this is E1B1A, RB88, EM81, EM78. We see these clades today in West Africa. And Hausa being the biggest group that we see in Nigeria, they're mixed up. Let's show that real quick before I go to my last paper that corroborates what we read, right? They're mixed up. Let me go to the Hausa genetics on Wiki. So if you go to the Wiki and then you go down to the genetics section right here on the Hausa, according to a Y-DNA study at Hassan and all, this is the Sudan. We don't want the Sudan, right? We want the Nigerians. A more recent study on Hausa of the Arewa, northern Nigeria, revealed different results. 47% of them are E1B1A, so less than half, typical of Niger-Congo populations. 5% are E1B1B, that'll give you EM78, right? 21% are other haplogroup, EM33, EM75, E1As, E2s. 18% are R1B. 18%, damn near 20% of them are R1B, right? And 9% of B, and the remaining 5% is E1B, E1B1B. So this must be another clade, maybe EM81. So 10% total E1B1B. And this is your largest Nigerian demographic, the Hausa. No, they're not. Look how many people they represent in Nigeria. Hold on, let me go up. 69 fucking million in Nigeria. 69 million. And there's diversity within these people. They're not all the same. They come from migrations like everybody else. They got the RV88 amongst them. That's a migrant group that came from Europe at the onset, came from the Balkans at the onset. They travel through the Sahara and then make their way all the way to Chad, to the Chad Basin. West African history, Nigeria's history, is a history of migration. Didn't we just read that in the conclusion of the chapter of the prehistory of Nigeria? Didn't we just read that? Come on, man. What are we doing here? These developments first began as the result of migration. And we see that in the DNA. We see it in the DNA, man. So where are all these damn Africans at? Let me go to the last paper here. Share this paper here. This is the echoes from the last Green Sahara. Let me blow this up. And go to the segment here. The ancient Saharan hypothesis is about Fulani origin seems also to be supported by some analysis of the human Y chromosome. Fulani show a high proportion of a Y lineage, E1B M2, that's E1B1A, Z15939, dating back to the last Green Sahara. This lineage is exerted at lower frequencies also in Western and Northern Africa, while as absent in other sub-Saharan regions, pointing to a Green Saharan origin Fulani ancestors. Right? So let's go down to the conclusion. Again, this is a telemigration. Look at this. Look at this. Those lines are the purported lines of migration, which makes sense when you deal with the animal domesticates, when you deal with the cultivation. We see cowpea in West Africa. Cowpea comes from the Near East. It's a Southwest Asian crop. How does it get here? Easy. Migration. People moving into these regions. It's very simple to fix. This is not a hard question. All you got to do is throw in the word migration and it solves all of that. You can see portions of Anatolian ancestry coming in here, which makes sense because we do have RV88 coming from the Balkans region, right? We see them coming in there. We got E1B1B, which we know have ancient ties to the Levant and Anatolia and Southern Europe. We know that, and then we see them coming in. So it's no question or wonder on how they get these foreign crops or ideas and know-how, because they coming from different areas and areas outside of what we know as sub-Saharan Africa, and they culminate and form an amalgam in the Green Sahara. Right? What does it say here? These Saharan people may have actually been the ancestors of present-day Sahelian people, including Fulani. Let's go down to the bottom here. Let's go down to the bottom. The population history of the Fulani and the Sahelian belt in general is very complex and seems to have been strongly influenced by the major Holocene climatic changes. In particular, the last Green Sahara, about 12,000, 5,000 years ago, seems to have played a major role in the population dynamics of that period, allowing the contacts between different groups to settle in that region, thus leading to the formation of pan-Saharan populations. The exact ancestry composition of such ghost populations cannot be completely unveiled from modern genomes only. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first study consistently analyzing modern Africans' whole genomes in the frame of ancient samples, and this approach has been proved to be disproportionately informative, suggesting similarity between putative ancient Saharans and late Neolithic Moroccans. We know who the late Neolithic Moroccans are, the Ibero-Maurusians. On this basis, these ancient Sahara groups may represent the ancestors of modern Sahelian populations, including the Fulani, who may be descendants of Saharan cattle herder groups who migrated westward as a response of aridification of the Sahara at the end of the Holocene climatic optimum. Again, Nigeria's history begins with migration. Isn't that what we just read in the Oxford Handbook of Nigerian ancestry? Grand Regent Thrax says, I mostly hear those racist non-Africans claim black people didn't migrate. Man, listen, you would think that, but it's mostly these Afrocentrics that are perpetuating, propagating that. Every stream, 8-hour streams, they're there to tell you that these people did not move a damn place, even though they have different haplogroups, which means they derive from different population sources that come from different geographical locations on the globe. Anyway, I'm done here. Y'all want this paper? Y'all can read these papers yourself. Here's the Green Sahara one. Put that in the chat. Here's the ISOG. Here's that one. Put that one in the chat as well. I also will put the history of male migration in and out of Green Sahara in the chat. So when you mention Nigeria, when you mention Sub-Saharan Africa, when you mention Ghana, when you mention Cameroon, just know you got to mention migration and diversity. These people are not stagnant. They're not in a time warp. You know, they're not stuck. They're not statues. If some of you people think they're gargoyles, they turn to stone at night and they're not able to move. None of that's true. These people have been moving for thousands of years, and we can see it in their genomes. We can see it in the archaeological record, the anthropological record. We can see these things. We can see it through cultivation. We can see it through animal domestics. We can see all of that. These people come from a diverse group and a diverse background. And this is why these population booms happen. This is why E1B1A is so numerous, RV88 is so numerous, because they were able to benefit from these plant cultivation, pastoralist, agro-pastoralist lifestyles. And that's the motherfucking deal. We out, man. These niggas don't read, man. Fuck the ops.
Hey, that shit hit different. On 4 down. Hey, on the guys, I know y'all been waiting on this one. It hit different. Hold on. Gang. Hey, try to run and still get shot. That shit hit different. Hey, stuffing hollows in my Glock. That shit hit different. Hey, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Hey, gun size a boss top. That shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Hey, that shit hit different. Hey, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Hey, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch, tax the Swifty to the Glock, make it spit different. Hey, bro, just beat a murder case, that shit hit different. Hey, my side bitch another race, that shit hit different. Hey, I got a Glock, bro, got a Glock, but bitch, my shit different. Hey, I got VVs round my neck and them hoes hit different. Hey, I cut my baby mama off cause that bitch be tripping. Hey, caught him lacking at the stody nigga be slipping. Hey, got 33 in my 23, Scotty Michael Pippen. Y'all ass tweaking bitches merch, you know it hit different. It's 200 on my dash, no my whip different. I put my shooters on your ass, it's gon' hit different. No, my boys ain't come to play, they gon' kill a way. Try to run and still get shot, that shit hit different. Ayy, stuffing hollows in my Glock, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Ayy, gun size a boss top, that shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Ayy, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch, when she found out that you rap, that shit hit different. Ayy, when her sister let you clap, that shit hit different. Ayy, think I'm lacking, but I'm strapped, that shit hit different. Ayy, I put my city on the map, that shit hit different. Ayy, I'ma fuck a doggy style, cause it hit different. Ayy, screaming free the problem child, bitch, it hit different. Ayy, all my shorties going wild, bitch, it hit different. Ayy, milk the game like a cow, bitch, it hit different. Ayy, when your cousin them the ops, you know it hit different. Ayy, when you really on your block, bitch, it hit different. Ayy, when you really worth a check, that shit hit different. Ayy, I put the block around my neck because it hit different. Ayy, bitch, try to run and still get shot, that shit hit different. Ayy, stuffing hollows in my Glock, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you smoke your first op, that shit hit different. Ayy, gun size a boss top, that shit hit different. Bitch, that shit hit different. Ayy, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you really bout that life, that shit hit different. Bitch, when you living what you rock, that shit hit different. Ayy, when you know these niggas cop, that shit hit different. Bitch.